The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So I'm going to be talking about how can we challenge our karmic tendencies, our karmic propensities. How do we deepen our practice? And I can tell you that preparing a Sunday Dharma talk and walking up here is quite a challenge to karmic propensities. So I've been challenging them a lot today. I just want to explain a little bit about what I mean by challenge. I don't mean fighting them or, doing battle with them. I mean something gentler and kind-hearted. It's just not believing them, or not believing them so much, not giving them so much weight, not acting on them, and also not turning away from them. And that's a big part of it. And I picked this topic because it's something that I have been focused more on recently. In general, just the meditation that we do and the training that we do is a challenge to our karma and to our tendencies. When we go to the meditation hall, or when we go to sit down to meditate, and we sit and we let our thoughts come and go, we let our feelings come and go, well, that's the ideal, but we do the best we can. We bring ourselves back when we've gotten sidetracked. We make the choice of coming back instead of just wandering off. That is challenging all the stuff that's arising. It's not believing in it, trusting in something deeper, trusting in the teaching. When we're mindful in daily life, we're doing the same thing. And there are many other aspects of our training that are challenging how we normally live our lives, how we normally react to things. The precepts. We're loosening our grip on all those aspects of the precepts that we have broken in the past and that we break regularly, but we're trying. The anger that arises, the speaking against others, the critical mind. We're challenging that in trying to keep the precepts. And what came to mind in thinking about the practices that we might be doing are the Brahma Viharas, which are, I can't think of the exact word, but they're that which is bigger than the self, that which embraces everything. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And I think sympathetic joy is the most challenge to a way that we might normally look at things, because it's rejoicing in the good fortune of others. And all of these things actually arise naturally if we give them a chance. They're who we truly are. But often we're jealous if somebody's doing better than us. We're angry. And the whole gamut of things that we do in regards to that. So that's how we are just challenging it in just everyday life when we do this practice. And sometimes coming to the monastery for the first time is a real challenge to our how we see life. We may be cynical, we may be doubting, we may not have any faith, but you come anyway. And that is the start. That's the start of seeing that there's another way, that the way that we've looked at life up until now is not all that there is. Greed, anger, and delusion, you've heard that very often, and that is part of the human condition. And we all experience these things in different degrees and ways. And what I mean by what I would say is a karmic tendency is something that we've done over and over and over again, like reacting in a certain way in a certain situation, always getting angry when such and such happens, always feeling hurt when such and such happens, feeling fear in a certain situation, and believing it over and over and over again, and acting on it and feeling it, and pretty soon it's who we are and what we're like, and we don't see things differently. The karmic tendencies that we have are inherited from our past life karma. And I was very happy to hear this because for all of my life I couldn't understand why I was as I was. I thought there must have been a reason. I remember seeing a story about someone who had a brain tumor, and once they had it removed, they saw things completely differently, and I thought, well, maybe that's it, But then when I heard about past life karma, it was just such a relief to me that this explains a lot of why I see things in a way that, is sometimes really, well, I won't go into that. But at any rate, so the karmic tendencies are things that we have inherited, and how we've lived our life up until now. And this can be due to what we've been taught, either directly or indirectly, by our society, by our parents, by our teachers, how we've protected ourselves, how we've survived in difficult situations. And so you can't look at these things in such a negative way because they've kind of gotten us to where we are today. And some of us wouldn't have survived without certain defenses. But now we know that there's another way. And these are actually the things that bind us to our suffering. They're the bondage of the self. We have all kinds of views about ourselves, all kinds of opinions about others, ourselves, life, the world, and we hold on to them because that's what we know. But the training breaks, kind of chips away at this and helps us to let go. Meditation and training, as I just said, challenge all this and can also be scary at times. And we can even stop the meditation and the training because of this fear. But I encourage you not to let fear rule your life. And I'm sure you don't completely. Or you wouldn't be here. It's really important to start challenging these states of mind, even in small ways. Going to the meditation hall or going to your meditation spot when you don't want to, when you're tired, when you feel there's no point, when you're feeling despairing, when you're feeling maybe apathetic towards it. Where do all these things come from? I think it's because partially, sometimes we are just tired, but I think partially they're caused by not wanting to see what's in front of us, by being afraid. and I'll talk more about this, but I remember that there are many times since being a monk that I would not have gone to the meditation hall if I'd had a choice. But I didn't have a choice, and so I went. And although I have a really bad memory, there are certain things, I don't know why, that just stand out. And one of these is a time where I just was feeling kind of despairing, and I thought, really, what's the point of going to meditation? But I went anyway, because I had to. That's the benefit of being at the monastery. You don't have a choice. And I went and I meditated, and I left feeling completely differently. It was amazing. I felt bright and positive, and that can happen because these states of mind aren't real. They are things that come and go. And I'd like to give you some examples of karmic tendencies. And this is just a very small list. They get much more complex than I'm going to mention. But I'll mention a few that came to mind in preparing this talk. Feelings of inadequacy, worthlessness, pride, comparing ourselves with others. I remember, I think it was Reverend Master Mayan who said to me, you'd say, oh, so-and-so is doing so much better in their training. And, there are all kinds of aspects of this. They're prettier than me, they're handsomer than me, they have more friends, they are smarter, they're brighter than me. If you have this attitude, there'll always be something that is better, smarter, doing better than you'll think. So it's something to really think about letting go of, because it really doesn't lead anywhere. Excuse me. Doubts, apathy, boredom. I wrote doubts twice, you can tell what it is. Lack of faith in oneself, cynicism, harsh judgments of ourselves and others, the critical mind, thinking one is bad or thinking one is wonderful, caring what others think of us, wanting to please others, wanting approval, love, or acceptance, being influenced by what other people think of us, feeling like we can't do something because of fear or inadequacy, and then how we react to these feelings, how we respond and what we do in response to them. We all have our own flavor of karmic tendencies and feelings. For each of us, certain conditions stir up different feelings. Some of the reactions are fear, worry, being hurt to the point of devastation. This used to happen to me. If Reverend Master Jiyu said something to me, I could be devastated for a week. And I was fortunate that after a week I recovered. Anger, defensiveness, humiliation, and also karma is opportunistic and can jump in there when certain conditions are present and bring on painful and difficult feelings from the past, or just our tendencies towards seeing things in a certain way. So knowing that, in thinking about this, if you think, well, karma's jumping in now because this situation will allows it to arise, and it's a way of cleansing it. If you can look at it that way, perhaps it won't be so believable, and you can just be with it and not turn away. The Buddha spoke about the 8 winds, or the 8 worldly conditions, the winds that are always blowing through our lives. Praise and blame, fame and disgrace, elation and sorrow, gain and loss. These things affect us, and they happen to everyone, and they never go away. I think when some of our monks asked a very venerable Cambodian monk, Maha Ghosananda, what is your teaching for us? He said, the 8 worldly conditions are always there. So don't expect them to go away. But it's how we respond to them that's important. Can we accept the ones we think of as negative? Can we be still within the ones that we think of as positive? They all come and go. If you're praised one day, you're very often blamed the next day. So what good does it do? It's only feeding the self in some way or other, and it's letting go of the self that brings true peace. So feeding the self really doesn't help. For me, as I said, I've been focusing more on this aspect of my training, and especially since I have been preparing and thinking about this Dharma talk, I have been making more of an effort to be mindful in daily life, to not turn away from the suffering that arises with kindness and with faith, and to trust that it's okay to feel these difficult and painful things that arise, and that it's not the true reality. Because when they do arise, they feel real. And they do for me anyway. All I can do is talk about myself and trust that we're all similar in many ways. And then to catch myself when I'm about to respond in a habitual and harmful, negative way that breaks the precepts and reinforces this way of reacting and viewing life. When you catch yourself, it makes a very big difference. It starts shifting something in you. When we train and work on these karmic tendencies, the belief in them and their power over us diminishes and weakens. When we continue to act on them, they grow. And you can see this happening. It makes me think of a Chalanatha over here who sits within the flames of greed, hate, and delusion, or greed, anger, and delusion. When we continue to feed these flames, they continue to flame. They continue to grow. We're adding fuel to the fire. When we work on them, the flames gradually die down and can go out. But, this isn't easy, as you all know. It's one of the hardest things that you can do. What do we put in the way of our challenging our karma and deepening our training? Again, this is for me. Not meditating. Shutting down, closing off, what I call freezing up. Avoiding the situation. Distracting ourselves with all kinds of things. Not being present. Constantly thinking. What I see in myself is I'm planning a trip to the Bay Area in September. 4.5 months away, or 3.5. It makes me feel secure to have it all planned out. But this is just ridiculous. It doesn't make me secure in any way. It's just a distraction. Thinking about the past, planning the future, and just thinking. Daydreaming, turning towards that which comforts us. And you all probably know what that is for you. Kindness above all is so important in our training. Kindness to ourselves and to others. Karmic tendencies run deep, and we're often not even aware of them and their effect on us. Looking at and letting go of these can be very, very difficult and very gradual. Narada Thera said in a book about basic Buddhism, and I was not able to find this quote, but he said that, someone told me he said this, that the force of our cravings are so strong that it takes something 8 times as strong to break its bonds. And that which is 8 times as strong is the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's our training. So that should be somewhat reassuring. This training is very, very difficult. And yet we can do it. And when we see a way, we should take that way. When I find for myself sometimes when I'm meditating, there's something I don't want to see, something I don't want to feel, and yet I know I can. And so I turn towards it instead of turning away. So when you see there's a step you can take in a positive direction, take it. Reverend Master Daisui said to me once that there are those who leap ahead and those who chip away. He said he was the former and that I was the latter, and that both were fine. And this makes me think of the story in Beyond the Pale of Vengeance. I don't know if you're all aware of that or not, but the story of someone who did great harm to travelers and then became a monk and wanted to do good. So he decided to carve a tunnel through a mountain so that travelers could go through the tunnel instead of going around this cliff that was very dangerous. But all he had was a chisel and a hammer. And people thought he was ridiculous at first. You're never going to go through that mountain. But he kept on going. And eventually people stopped laughing at him and started helping him. And it took him 20 years. But chip by chip, he chipped away at that mountain. And he was also, in doing that, wearing away his karma. And letting go of it. And that's how it can happen. We are chipping away at it gradually, but it is being chipped away. And it is being worn away. I think I mentioned this a bit earlier, but the only way I know how to work on my karma is to not turn away from it and to not believe in it so completely. And it can be very believable, especially if we've believed it all our lives and in past lives. The whole thing about challenging karma is the willingness to be with what is arising at the moment, trusting that we can and that it's okay. It's temporary. It's not who we really are, and it's not true. It's the willingness to open the door, loosen the grip on these long-held beliefs about ourselves and the world. And these views and beliefs and karmic tendencies can be quite convoluted and quite confused and not really based on reality. Reverend Master Mayan has said, when you're about to do something challenging and the self is saying you're inadequate for the job, like walking out here and giving a Dharma talk, and for her it was becoming abbess and doing everything that entails, you put on the togs and do the deed. So I love that. It's so down to earth and straightforward. The Buddha said that patient endurance, this won't stay there, okay. Patient endurance is the highest austerity. So enduring that which is difficult to endure, not running away from that which is difficult to bear. And the Buddha knew that this was difficult, but it eventually passes. And if we don't add fuel to the fire, we won't add karma to what we have to patiently endure in the future. In working on this talk, I became more aware of my own flavor of karmic tendencies, which tends to happen whenever you give spiritual counseling, the very thing you're talking about comes up later to challenge you. That's what I found anyway. So I have become more aware of my karmic tendencies. And so I had more of an impetus to not hide from or cover up the suffering that was arising in my being willing to look. And also not to hold on to it. And I felt lighter from doing so. It's very interesting. In the midst of this, I ran into a karmic storm with another monk. And I saw how deeply the karmic tendencies run and how difficult it is to change and how easy it is to fall into old patterns, even though I was trying hard not to. I was very distressed by this incident, and then depressed. And, so the whole thing kicked in, my whole pattern kicked in. That I had no faith in my training, that I couldn't look within, that there was no point, that I couldn't trust my own judgments. So there was my own flavor. And generally when I'm having a difficult time, I call on Avalokiteshvara for help. But when I get to this kind of a karmic thing, it's like nothing can help. What's the point in calling on help? Nothing can help me. There is nothing to help me. All is bleak. So I sat down in my room and I thought, well, what shall I do? Well, I think I'll knit. I've gotten into knitting lately. So I sat down to knit. Might as well, do something. And my cat sat on my lap. And suddenly, it was all gone. And I felt like I had done nothing. Nothing I had tried to do. I felt at peace and that everything was basically okay. And I think it was because I've been working hard on these karmic tendencies. And even amidst the karmic storm, I didn't give in to certain tendencies that I normally would have. So I think it was, you just never know when something will come in and help. And also that as you continue your training, you can't really hold on to these things for as long as you used to. I mean, it used to be I could hold on to things for like 3 months. But now, I don't hold on to them so long. They go more quickly. And later, all those karmic feelings hit. What the situation brought up into me, which was a lot of very painful stuff. So I didn't escape all that, but I didn't believe so much in the other things that had arisen, and I was more able to be with them with faith. And then later I saw something else that I had never seen before, which was another karmic tendency, which was then I had, I was going to say I had the gall to think that this person, I was hoping this person would come and apologize. So to make it all be their fault and tell me, reassure me that I wasn't bad. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, Isn't that interesting? That's how I used to feel. I think my father used to, in some way, make me feel like I was bad, that I was responsible for everything, and that I was generally a bad person. So I always, when I was young, I always had this hope that he would come to me and say, no, it's my fault. You aren't bad. So this feeling came up in the midst of that. And I knew all I could do was sit with it. And so I did. And even when I can't sit with something completely, generally by the next day it's gone. And overnight is a wonderful time for letting things go. I often find that something that's so distressing during the day is gone the next morning. So I wanted to talk about fear a little bit, because fear is something that can really stand in the way of life in general and of our training. And it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. I think that we're so often just afraid to even be with fear. And we can. We can be with fear, and we can act even when we're fearful. There is actually nothing wrong with being afraid. And we each have our own flavor of fear, what scares us. Very interesting that being cold scares me. And I used to get really angry when, we'd have windows open in the meditation hall and it was cold outside. And I have to say the anger still does arise, but I don't give in to it. But then I used to give in to it, and I was constantly trying to organize my life so that I didn't get cold. And Reverend Master Mahan said to me, you need to challenge that. The karma is running your life. And that helped me a lot, to see what was stirred up by being cold. And it was very painful. And now I'm just, I'm continuing to challenge it. You know, when the fear of being cold is there, just being with that and not worrying about it. But it keeps arising. You know, when I go into the meditation hall and the windows are open, that whole thing arises. I don't want to be here. I don't want to come to the meditation hall if the windows are going to be open. And it's believable. So I now go there and I let those things arise and pass, and then I sit. And before long, I've forgotten about the windows completely, and it doesn't even matter. This is how real our karma is. And I wanted to... some people are afraid of being too warm. So it's different for all of us. Some people are afraid of heights. But many years ago, I was giving an introductory retreat Dharma talk, and in the middle of the talk, or towards the beginning of the talk, suddenly I couldn't say anything. Nothing would come out. And I really tried, and no words would come out. I even had trouble saying, please excuse me. But I had to leave the room. And I was totally humiliated. And I realized that there was someone there who was, I don't know exactly what the person was doing, but they were either really judgmental or really doubting or really challenging, even though they didn't say anything. I was so sensitive at that time that I picked up on it and I could not speak in that atmosphere. So I just, with the humiliation, it was like, I'm not going to do anything else that creates humiliation, I don't care what happens, I'm not going to get humiliated again. So I stopped doing Dharma talks, and then gradually anything that scared me, even a little, I stopped doing, until I had boxed myself into a corner of fear. And I know, I've talked to people who have done this as well. And I went and talked to Reverend Master Daisui, and he said, you have to open that door. You have to push open that box and gradually challenge the fear. And do things at first that aren't quite so fearful, and then gradually do things that are more and more fearful. And I did that. And it worked. It worked. I mean, I still have fears, but I suddenly realized that I was in bondage by that fear, and I didn't have to be. Fear is telling you can't do something, or you can't feel something, and it's not real. Although if your fear tells you don't jump into the Grand Canyon, I would listen to that fear. So listen to healthy fears that are warning you that things are not good to do. But fears that aren't, we can gradually let go of their bondage. And it is helpful to remember that we are all doing our best, that karmic patterns run deep, that it is very difficult to convert, that chipping away gradually does wear them away, so that we can let the light in, the light that is there. We don't have to continue to view the world, life, ourselves as we've done in the past. The Buddha taught another way, which allows brightness and joyfulness to enter. How real is this karma that has such an effect on us? I want to read something here from the song that attests to the way. Good sir, have you not yet caught sight of the one who has broken off his pursuit of knowledge and seeks no goals, and now leisurely walks the way? He does not try to exclude from his mind foolish or deluded thoughts, nor does he hunt after truth. For the real nature of his ignorance is none other than Buddha nature, and his illusory, ever-changing body, empty of any permanent self, is none other than the Dharma body. Once we have realized what the Dharma body is, not a single thing exists that we can call our own. For our original self-nature is the Buddha of ultimate reality. Our 5 skandhas are as floating clouds, vainly coming and going. And the 3 poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion are as water bubbles which emerge and disappear to no purpose. Once we have awakened to that which is real, persons and things no longer exist. And in a second, the karma that has been dragging us through the incessant torments of Avicii hells dissolves into thin air. And I think some of us have experienced some of this in being really affected by something and being miserable, and then suddenly something shifts, and it's gone. And life isn't like that at all. So what do we do when we believe in and fall into the karmic trap? What do we do when we've believed in it and acting on it? And we can be very harsh judges of ourselves. I know this from experience. But the judgment is just the self again. And it actually doesn't help. And it's actually more helpful to be with the suffering it brings up and learn from it than to continually judge ourselves. And this is a choice that we have. Also, we can trust in our own good heart, in our own aspiration when we fall down, or when our karma is raging. trust that it is still there, that we have a good intention. I was listening to some Dharma talks by one of our monks on the Shobogenzo and Great Master Dogen, and one of the things that he said made a great impression on me and really helped me. That I think I should keep saying we all I know is myself. I don't know what you all think or do or feel. So I can just say myself, but I suspect that we're afraid of what might arise in meditation, that we're afraid of the self, seeing all the negativity or the harshness or the pride or the judgments or the cruelty, whatever it is, we're afraid of seeing that in ourselves. Even though the teaching is not who we truly are. It is just stuff arising and passing away. And this monk and Dogen said that we really don't need to fear anything that arises in meditation, because at the heart of it all is compassion. And that if we are willing to be with whatever is going on, that we will come to this great compassion that fills the universe. I found that really reassuring. And Pema Chodron also says something about our good heart. She says, I want to make sure I have the right page. Here it is. Okay, it is right. When you refrain from habitual thoughts and behavior, the uncomfortable feelings will still be there. They don't magically disappear. Over the years, I've come to call resting with the discomfort the detox period. Because when you don't act on your habitual reactions, it's like giving up an addiction. You're left with the feelings you were trying to escape. The practice is to make a wholehearted relationship with that. The underlying anxiety can be very strong. You may experience it as hopelessness or even terror. But the basic view is that if you can remain with the feeling, if you can go through the fear, the hopelessness, the resistance in its various forms, you will find basic goodness. Everything opens up. A poem by the late Rick Field speaks to this process. The world, absolutely pure as is, behind the fear, vulnerability, behind that, sadness, then compassion, and behind that, the vast sky. So I'll end on that note, because I think it's lovely. And thank you for allowing me to do this talk. It was seeing all your bright faces that allowed it to come out. So I thank you.